All right, let's dive into the fascinating world of habits today. We'll be exploring James Clear's atomic habits. We're going to unpack why those tiny changes you make can actually matter so much. We'll also see how habits and our own identities are really intertwined. And we'll explore the first part of Clear's framework for making habits stick. It's called the Four Laws of Behavior Change.
You know, what's really cool is that Clear actually uses his own life as a case study. He had a pretty serious injury back in high school, and his recovery process is a big part of what led him to these ideas about small changes.
Oh, okay, so what happened to him?
He was hit in the face with a baseball bat, pretty severe injuries, broken bones, even ended up in a coma. It was a really, really long road to recovery. And during that recovery, he started focusing on making these tiny improvements each day.
Yeah, I can see how facing something like that would make you reevaluate things.
Absolutely. It forced him to really break everything down into those manageable steps, one day at a time. And that experience led him to this idea of atomic habits. Tiny changes that seem insignificant at first, but over time they have a huge cumulative
It's
effect.
kind of like compound interest, right? Small gains accumulate over time,
Yeah,
and then boom, you see significant results.
exactly. And Clear uses a really compelling example to illustrate this. British cycling, they were struggling for years until their coach decided to focus on optimizing every tiny aspect of their performance.
So instead of making like big sweeping changes, they just focused on those small incremental improvements.
That's it. They made adjustments to everything, from the type of pillows the athletes use to how they even wash their hands, all to reduce the risk of getting an infection. These tiny changes really added up, and British cycling went on to dominate their sport.
Wow, that's really amazing. It
Yeah.
really shows how those tiny gains can snowball into something much bigger.
Clear doesn't just talk about outcomes. He also dives deep into the psychology of habits. He emphasizes the connection between habits and identity. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued.
He argues that lasting change isn't just about setting goals. It's not even just about changing processes. It's about shifting your identity. It's like your habits shape who you are, but also who you are shapes your habits. It's a powerful loop.
So it's not just about doing those actions. It's about becoming the type of person who does those actions.
Precisely. And he uses this insightful analogy to explain this. Imagine two people trying to quit smoking. One says, I'm trying to quit, implying they still think of themselves as a smoker. The other person says, I'm not a smoker, reflecting a change in their identity. That subtle change in language can make a huge difference.
That's a really great example. I can see how seeing yourself as a non-smoker would make it easier to actually quit.
Exactly. It's about aligning your actions with the person you want to become.
So how can people practically apply this idea of identity to their own lives?
Clear suggests a two-step process. First, you decide the type of person you want to be. Ask yourself, what values do you want to embody? What does the ideal version of yourself look like?
So if I want to become a writer, I should start thinking of myself as a writer.
That's the idea. The second step is to prove it to yourself with small wins. Each time you act in alignment with that desired identity, you reinforce that belief. So each time you sit down to write, you're casting a vote for your writer identity.
I love that analogy. It's like building evidence for the type of person you want to become.
Now, to actually change our habits, Clear introduces this framework he calls the four laws of behavior change. Each law acts as a lever to influence our actions.
Okay, let's dive into these laws. What's the first one?
The first law is make it obvious. Clear says that the most obvious cues for habits are often time and location. He suggests using what he calls implementation intentions, which is making a specific plan for when and where you'll do something.
So instead of just saying, I want to exercise more, you'd say, I will go for a 30-minute run at 7 a.m. in the park.
You got it. The formula is I will behavior at time in location. And research has shown that people who use these intentions are more likely to follow through with their goals.
Makes sense. By being specific, you're removing any ambiguity, so it's harder to make excuses.
Clear also highlights the power of habit stacking, where you link a new habit to an existing one.
Oh, I've heard of this. It's like piggybacking on an existing routine, right?
Exactly. The formula is after current habit, I will new habit. It's a way to leverage the natural flow of your day to incorporate new behaviors. He gives examples like meditating after pouring your morning coffee, or doing 10 push-ups after you close your laptop for lunch.
I love that. It's like tricking your brain into adopting a new habit by attaching it to something you already do automatically.
And it's not just about time and location. Clear also points out how much visual cues in our environment can impact our habits.
Oh, yeah, this is fascinating. I've definitely noticed that I'm more likely to snack on unhealthy foods if they're sitting out on the counter.
That's exactly it. He found that keeping a bowl of fruit on his counter instead of hidden in the fridge made him much more likely to eat it.
Such a simple change, but such a big difference.
He also shares this fascinating example of how Schiphol Airport used visual cues to improve men's aim in the restrooms. They put fly stickers in the urinals, which subtly encouraged men to aim more accurately, leading to a reduction in cleaning costs.
Can you believe how much those little stickers change things? Our environment really does have a powerful influence on our behavior.
It really does. So, for our listeners, the key takeaway here is to make the cues for your desired habits more obvious. Think about rearranging your space, adding visual reminders, or using implementation intentions and habit stacking to create a clear path to action.
It's like making good habits easier to follow and bad habits harder to access.
Precisely. Now that we've made our desired habit obvious, the question becomes, how do we make it something we actually want to do? That's where the second law comes in, but we'll save that for part 2.
All right, welcome back. So we made it obvious, but what's the next step? What's the next lever we can pull to help us build those better habits?
So the second law is make it attractive. This law really taps into the motivational force behind habits. It's all about the craving.
Oh, so it's about making the habit something you actually want to do, not just something you feel like you should do.
Exactly. Our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain, so we naturally gravitate towards activities that kind of light up our reward system.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we tap into this reward system then? How do we actually make a habit more enticing?
Well, Clear talks about dopamine, that feel-good neurotransmitter, and how it actually plays a big role in forming habits. When we anticipate a reward, our brains release dopamine, which creates this sense of desire, and that motivates us to act.
Makes sense. So the more attractive a habit is, the bigger the dopamine hit. And then boom, the more likely we are to repeat it.
You got it. One strategy Clear suggests is temptation bundling, where you pair something you want to do with something you need to do.
Ooh, okay, I like where this is going.
Okay, so let's say you love watching Netflix, but you also know you really need to exercise more. You could use temptation bundling. Only allow yourself to watch your favorite shows while you're on the treadmill or the stationary bike.
Brilliant. So you're basically turning exercise into a gateway to something you already crave.
That's the idea. You're making it more desirable because it's linked to something enjoyable.
I've actually tried something similar with podcasts and running. I only let myself listen to my favorite podcasts when I'm out on a run. And honestly, it makes those runs so much more enjoyable.
See? Now, another interesting aspect Clear highlights is the influence of our social environment. Our social environment actually plays a big role in habit formation, too.
So peer pressure, but like for adults.
In a way, we're naturally drawn to the habits of the people around us,
Yeah.
especially those we admire, those we want to be like. It's that whole monkey see, monkey do thing.
It's true. I've noticed my own eating habits tend to shift depending on who I'm hanging out with.
Right. Think about it. We adopt habits from our culture, our friend groups, our families. It's like we're constantly taking cues from those around us.
So if you want to pick up a good habit, surround yourself with people who already have it.
Exactly. But the opposite is also true, which is important to remember. If you're trying to eat healthy, but all your friends are ordering pizza and fries, well, it's going to be a lot harder to resist.
So true. It's all about creating that environment that supports your goals.
Absolutely. Clear suggests finding a group where your desired behavior is already the norm. So if you want to become a runner, join a running club. Want to learn a new language? Find a group of language learners.
That makes so much sense. It's not just about willpower then, is it? It's about creating that social structure that actually supports you.
Right. Now, once you've made that habit attractive, the next step is to make it easy. And that's where the third law comes in.
Okay, I'm ready for law number 3. Make it easy.
Okay, so this law focuses on reducing friction for those good habits and increasing friction for the bad ones. Clear's idea here is that the easier a habit is to perform, the more likely you'll do it.
So it's about removing those obstacles and streamlining the process.
Yes, exactly. Think about it like the path of least resistance. We naturally gravitate toward whatever's the easiest option. Like if you want to eat healthier snacks, keep a bowl of fruit right there on the counter instead of tucked away in the fridge.
Sounds so simple, but it's true. Out of sight, out of mind.
Right. Or let's say you want to watch less TV, unplug it after each use. Or keep the remote in a drawer. Make it a little harder to indulge.
I like this. It's not about depriving yourself. It's just about making the bad habit slightly less convenient.
Clear calls this priming the environment, setting things up to encourage those good habits and discourage the bad ones.
So it's not just about willpower or motivation. It's about strategically designing our surroundings.
Exactly. Now, Claire also introduces a really clever strategy. He calls it the 2-minute rule.
Okay, tell me about this 2-minute rule. I love me some simple strategies.
So the idea is to start any new habit with a version that takes 2 minutes or less. So if you want to start running, just start by putting on your running shoes and stepping outside. If you want to write a book, just write 1 sentence each day.
Oh, I see. It's like lowering the barrier to entry, making it so easy you can't say no.
You got it. You're kind of tricking your brain into getting started, and once you've overcome that initial resistance, you're more likely to continue with the full habit.
It's like building momentum, right? Once you get the ball rolling, it's easier to keep it moving.
Now we've covered 3 laws. Make it obvious, make it attractive, and make it easy. Ready for the 4th and final law.
Absolutely. Bring on law number 4.
Welcome back. It's the final part of our deep dive into atomic habits. We've covered a lot, like understanding how those tiny changes lead to big results, and exploring 3 of the 4 laws of behave and change. Make it obvious, make it attractive, and make it easy. Now let's talk about that 4th law. Make it satisfying.
Okay, I've been waiting for this one. I have a feeling this is the part about celebrating those wins, right?
You got it. This law really taps into our brain's reward system. Remember when we talked about dopamine? And that feeling of pleasure we get when we anticipate something good? Well, this law is all about making sure the habit itself delivers that rewarding feeling, so we're motivated to keep going.
So it's like, we're not just setting ourselves up for success with the first 3 laws,
Mhm.
but we're also ensuring the habit itself is enjoyable and rewarding.
Exactly. And this really ties into what Clear calls the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is rewarded is repeated. What is punished is avoided.
That makes perfect sense. We're much more likely to do something again if it feels good, right? So how do we actually ensure that our new habits are satisfying?
One simple but powerful strategy is habit tracking. It's a way to visually monitor your progress.
Oh, I love habit tracking. There's something so satisfying about checking off a box on a to-do list or marking an X on the calendar.
I know, right? It gives you that sense of accomplishment, that feeling of, I did it. And that feeling is a reward in itself. Makes the habit more satisfying and motivating.
Like giving yourself a little gold star for each win.
Exactly. It's those small wins that keep us going, especially when we're just starting out. Clear also encourages us to celebrate our progress, too. It doesn't have to be anything big. It could be a small treat, a relaxing activity, or even just a moment of self-appreciation.
Yes, celebrate those milestones,
Mhm.
big or small. It's like you're acknowledging your effort and giving yourself permission to feel good about it.
Precisely. And that feeling of satisfaction reinforces the habit, making you more likely to stick with it.
So thinking about all 4 laws together, make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. They work together to create this powerful framework for habit change.
It's like a recipe for success. You need all 4 ingredients to really make it work. If any one of those elements is missing, the habit is less likely to stick.
It's like building a house. You need that strong foundation, make it obvious. Attractive design elements, make it attractive. Efficient systems, make it easy. And a comfortable and enjoyable space to live in, make it satisfying.
That's a great analogy. It's about creating a sustainable system that supports those desired behaviors.
This has been such an insightful deep dive into atomic habits. What would you say is the most important takeaway for our listeners?
I think the key takeaway is this. Small changes, consistently applied, can lead to remarkable results. It's not about finding some magic formula or an overnight solution. It's about understanding the science of how habits actually work, and then applying these simple but powerful principles to your own life.
And remember, you don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight. Start small, focus on one habit at a time, and use these 4 laws to make it stick.
Exactly. And don't forget to celebrate those small wins along the way.
This has been another great deep dive. Thanks for joining us. And to our listener, what tiny change will you commit to today to become the person you want to be? Remember, every small step moves you closer to your goals.